Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking a break from all the distressing news in our world to join us for today's Open Mind program. I'm Vicki Goodman, and it is my honor to introduce today's special guest, Jonathan Mooney, renowned author and nationally recognized advocate for neurological and physical diversity. Jonathan has been inspiring those who live with differences and speaking out for change to strength-based education across the nation for decades. His work has been featured in the New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, HBO, NPR, ABC News, and the Washington Post. He's the author of 3 books, including Normal Sucks, How to Live, Learn, and Thrive Outside the Lines, that he will talk about today. He graduated from Brown University with an honors degree in English and was a recipient of the Truman Fellowship for Graduate Studies in Creative Writing and Disability Studies. Also with us today is Pascui Rivas, award-winning filmmaker who adapted Normal Sucks into a 10-minute short documentary, which we will view in just a moment. Mr. Rivas has most recently co-created the documentary series Phenoms and a feature documentary, Ordinary Gods. He has directed and edited over 200 award-winning television commercials and music videos and is dedicated to providing accurate and sensitive depictions of the Latinx experience in the media. And lastly, we are also honored to have with us Dr. Edward Ned Hallowell, board-certified child and adult psychiatrist and world authority on ADHD. Dr. Hallowell, who lives with ADHD and dyslexia himself, is the founder of the Hallowell ADHD Centers in Boston, Metro West, New York City, San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Seattle. He spent the past 4 decades helping thousands of adults and children live happy and productive lives through his strength-based approach to neurodiversity. He is a New York Times bestselling author of 20 books on multiple psychological topics, and his book, Driven to Distraction, that he co-authored with Dr. John Rady in 1994, sparked a revolution in understanding ADHD. He's been featured on 2020, 60 Minutes, Oprah, PBS, CNN, The Today Show, Dateline, Good Morning America, New York Times, and the list goes on. His podcast, Wonderful World of Different, is a 25-episode series where he chats with different guests each week. We'd like to thank all of our esteemed guests for taking the time from the busy schedules to be with us this evening to share their knowledge and expertise. For those of you with us for the first time, very quickly, the Open Mind Lecture and Film Series brings together thought leaders at the intersection of science and culture for meaningful and relevant discussions about mental health issues. It's proudly sponsored by UCLA's Friends of the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior and the Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital Board of Advisors. Few housekeeping notes. Today's program will be a little longer, 1 hour and 15 minutes. We will begin with the screening of Pascui Rivas's 10-minute documentary, and then following that, we will meet Jonathan Mooney and Dr. Ned Hallowell. The last segment of the program is reserved for your questions. If you would like to ask any of our speakers a question, we ask that you please type it into the Q&A, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We had over 1,000 people registered for today's program, so please be patient. We'll do our very best to get to as many questions as possible during the time allotted. Today's program is being recorded. You can view it tomorrow, beginning tomorrow, on our website, friendsofsemelinstitute.org, on our YouTube channel. On our website, you'll also find a library of videos from past programs, videos from WOW, the Mental Health Summit, a calendar of upcoming events and special events, including the Open Mind Film Festival for high school students that will be held in person this year and live streamed on Sunday, April 21st. And I'm also excited to announce our Teen Advisory Council's inaugural Gen Z Wellness Summit will be in person at UCLA on Sunday, February 25th. The event is free for high school and college students and will feature discussions about the unique mental health challenges that teens today face, along with some great Gen Z spoken word, comedy, and musical entertainment. So visit our website for more information. And now let's give a warm Zoom welcome to Pascui Rivas, who will introduce his documentary, Normal Sucks. And following that, I'll be back to introduce Jonathan and Ned. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for such a warm introduction. I want to thank everybody at the Friends of Semmel Institute and tell you a little about this film that I appreciate you calling it my film. I call it our film. At least it's Jonathan and I think, co-created this film. It came about when Jonathan had just finished writing his book. His book hadn't gone out yet. He reached out to me. And because he knew of my work in commercials and I had just done a studio pictures, he was more interested in perhaps, he asked me if I could do something to kind of spread the word about the book, something short, something very brief. And I said, all right, let me read the book to see what I could contribute to it. And today I was looking and I actually found the text that I wrote. I remember after reading it, I texted back and I found the text. Brother, I finished your book. Outstanding. As soon as I can stop crying, I'll reach out with some ideas. So I went back, reread it, made a ton of notes. This is my own copy. And then came back to Jonathan. I think, I don't think we should do something small just to spread the word. I think we should make a film. I think we should make a short documentary about this. And it took a bit of convincing because he had another idea, and I progressively started sharing what I thought this could become, and I knew that people would connect with a film version of this story as much as I did with the book. So that is how Normal Sucks film came about. So Jason, if you can share it.
Hey, which way we going?
Hi.
Hey, Kyle.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, bro, thanks for letting us do
Hey,
this,
no worries, man. It's my pleasure.
I brought this for your management. How long you worked here, man?
My whole life. This is my grandfather's place.
No way.
Yeah, you probably knew him. Alan?
I did know Alan.
Yeah, you probably know my dad too, Matt.
I know Matt.
Yeah, I'm his son.
Oh my
Third
God,
gen.
man. I haven't been back here since I was when I was 9 years old. I was officially diagnosed with a whole bunch of learning and attentional disabilities. After that diagnosis, my mom and I came here to this restaurant to go over the report that came from the school psychologist. And it was filled with negative words about her son. Language like Jonathan had executive functioning deficits. Jonathan had phonetic awareness disabilities. Is hyperactive with moments of inattentiveness, poor handwriting, below grade level phonetic awareness, consonant blending and spelling, executive functioning deficits, organizational challenges, speech problems. She read it out loud, maybe not knowing what that meant to me. And as my mom read that report, I turned to her and I said, hey, Mom, am I normal? And my mom said, you know what? Normal sucks. You know, books matter to me for a lot of different reasons. One of them being that they were always so kind of inaccessible to me for a long time. But this book right here maybe mattered the most. This is a children's book called Leo the Late Bloomer, you know, for like 5 years old or so. My mom used to read this book to me every morning because it's about a lion that can't do things, has a hard time, and then blooms later in life. It sort of proves them all wrong. So I've had a copy of this book with me my whole life. You know, took it to college, moved to New York with it, moved from New York to LA with it. You know, it sits here because I think it's a reminder that you never know what somebody can do. It's gonna all come out with missing words and who instead of how, and the wrong there, and it's just gonna be a mess. And so what that means for me is I gotta get a lot of help, and that's all good. My journey of change and healing, because that's what it was. I mean, I had a plan for suicide when I was 12, in large part because of messages I got about myself being less than and deficient, because I didn't fit that middle of the bell curve. So as I started to think about what constitutes healing, it was important to understand that, the processes, the ideas, the language that was used to sort of constrain my sense of self and damage my sense of self came from somewhere. I went on a mission to really understand the origin of my experience. And one of the most transformative things I learned was that normal hasn't always been normal. It has a history. Not of discovery, but invention. The word normal did not enter the English language until the 1860s. It was used historically first only within the academic discipline of geometry. It meant to be at a right angle, which is interesting because to be at a right angle implies that that's something that is good and right and true. Normal really came on the scene during the rise of industrialization and standardization. So there's a Belgian statistician named Hallowell who became obsessed with taking statistics and applying averages to human affairs. That's what starts to dominate our places of work, dominate our schools, dominates our view of the world. Normal is a suburban, white, straight, able-bodied dude with 2.5 children. And that 2.5 gives you the insight into how that is a statistical abstraction that cannot exist in the world.
Look at David, how straight he stands, with his glossy hair, his good color, his broad chest, beautiful feet with small ankle bones and fine arches.
Kids who end up on the wrong side of normal in school.
The case of Bob.
He's a disturbing element, frequently clowning and talking out of turn.
They find themselves with something called an individualized education plan. It's a file.
He's an unhappy child and is avoided by other children.
Surveillance file.
He insists on helping with the housework and with the cooking. He plays only with little girls because he says boys' games are too rough.
Immature. Psychoneurosis with conduct disorder. Fearful. Mixed psychoneurosis with depression. Stutters. Disruptive. Gifted but destructive and provocative. Possible organ
spelling,
neurosis.
executive
Diagnosis of
functioning
severe
deficits,
case.
organizational challenges, speech problems. What am I doing? Taking a right, I imagine?
Lincoln, yeah. To the left, to the right.
Dude, left and right, man. Don't stress about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Left and right, who and how. Hey, man, we'll get there.
You want me to cut it?
When I went to college, I told nobody about this, the learning and attentional issues. When I got to Brown, which is, a fancy Ivy League school, we had this transfer orientation where you went around the room and you said where you transferred from and what you did the summer before. Well, so everyone's just, I went to this fancy school, I had this fancy job, and here I was, the poor white trash kid, couldn't read until he was 12. I was like, I have no place here. So I remember literally pulling out my phone and texting my mom saying, I think I have to come home. What's the purpose of education? To make the round peg fit the square hole, essentially produce uniform human beings. That was the purpose of education in a standardized economy, to turn out widgets in factories. Or is the purpose of education to identify individual talent, because everybody's got something right with them, something that they're good at, something that they can contribute, and to nurture and grow that individual talent, interest, and passion. When I was a kid, I'd look around the room and I would find the words on posters or signs and only write sentences with those words so I didn't make a mistake. And that led to this dumb it down cycle. I never got my ideas on the page. Educators thought that I didn't have ideas to get on the page, and then I started acting like I didn't have any ideas to contribute. One day in 6th grade, my teacher had assigned us to write a story, and I was paralyzed. And my mom came up to me and said, "Hey, Jonathan, why don't you just tell that story to me?" And I was like, "You can do that?" She was like, "Of course you can do that. What do you think human beings have been doing since the beginning of time? Telling stories."
I'd like to introduce Jonathan Mooney.
Good morning.
Well, good afternoon. Wow. How y'all doing?
I didn't learn to read until I was 12 years old.
He wrote his first book before graduating from
I
college.
told I was the bad kid for one simple reason, and that's because I couldn't sit still.
But most importantly, he's known for giving voice to those who have been silenced.
I have something called dyslexia. Anybody ever heard of dyslexia? Yeah, I got a little dyslexia to have.
But I want to start today with the question of why do we accept the fact that school sucks and sucks big time?
We tell every kid they're a special snowflake, and then at some point in their education, we tell them, now stop being different. Over 50% of people in creative jobs have some sort of neurodiversity. Those strengths don't come despite the difference, they actually come because of the difference. If we got rid of the genes that were correlated with ADHD or dyslexia or Asperger's or autism or depression, human beings would be less creative, less entrepreneurial, and less successful as a species because they go hand in hand.
And I'm going to end on this note. I think that normal people suck. My man likes that in the back.
My mom was right. Normal does suck. The only normal people are people you don't know very well. So celebrate the difference and accommodate that difference. That's my through line for healing and transformation. And it started with my mom right here.
What a beautiful film celebrating the power of different. Pascui, thank you so much for sharing this heartwarming film with us, for making it. Jonathan, for your idea to do a film. Well, actually, it was both of your ideas. And thank you for sharing it with our open mind audience. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jonathan Mooney and Dr. Ned Hallowell. Please join us. Ned, Jonathan, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great.
What's up, y'all?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I'm just going to start with one question that I'm very curious about. How did the two of you meet originally?
Yeah, before I jump into that, I just want to give a shout out to y'all for hosting this. It's an honor to be a part of tonight, but really a part of your collective movement to celebrate brain differences and help folks with neurodivergence thrive in life. I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you. I also got to give a shout out to my good friend, Pascui. You know, there's a saying that I take to heart as a writer, that if I had more time, I'd write you a shorter letter. And that encapsulates this idea that doing something short that's moving and meaningful is a bigger challenge than a long treatise or tome or a 10-hour documentary. And Pascui took my story and handled it with such care and such commitment. And he took a social concept of normal that has been with us for millennia and distilled it to its essence in a way that was accessible and moving. And I'm just in awe of you, man. So thank you. Thank you for letting me go on that journey with you. Okay, so now to the question. Look, I found myself at Brown University in 1997 as a transfer student. Was never supposed to make it to a place like Brown. I was told I'd, be a high school dropout by my dad. I was told I'd be unemployed by a counselor. I was told I'd be incarcerated by a teacher. And I found myself at Brown. And I found myself with a fellow Brown student who had a journey of ADD, wasn't supposed to be at Brown either. And one night, this student named David Cole came up with this idea that we should write a book together. And that seemed like the most inane idea that one could come up with. A kid who didn't learn to read until he was 12, me, a kid who was homeless for a while, trying to figure out a way to write a book. But on second thought, it seemed like that could be important because we're not the only ones, as we all know. So Dave and I started on this path of trying to figure out how we tell our story. What would that book look like? And one night we got it in our head that if we could just get in touch with the luminary, Ned Hallowell, he could help us. I mean, Driven to Distraction had come out in 1994, and this was a seminal moment in the history of neurodivergent, neurodiversity, and ADD. I read that book cover to cover. That was a manifesto. It was a guide. It was life-changing. So Dave and I did the 6 degree of separation thing and tried to figure out if we could get in touch with Ned. And somehow we got Ned's summer home telephone number. And we spent, I kid you not, an entire month calling this man's house, getting the answering machine, being too scared to leave a message. And then one day, we got Ned himself on the phone. And I'm sure we were completely incoherent. We were starstruck, one of those we're not worthy moments. And eventually we told him about our book and our story. And I remember like it was yesterday, Ned said, hold on. He put down the phone and he came back and he said, call this woman. She's my agent, a woman named Jill Nerum. Jill will help you get this book published. Fast forward a month later, Jill Nerum was Dave and I's agent. Ned had agreed to write the foreword to the book that became Learning Outside the Lines. And Dave and I, as undergraduates at Brown, found ourselves with a book contract, an experience that fundamentally changed our life. So I am just so humbled and honored, Ned, to be here tonight with you. You have meant so much to so many people. And I'm just really grateful that you got that restraining order on me lifted after I stalked you at your summer house. And
I would never have done that. I got a welcoming order on you. That's wanted to get more of you. So
well, that's how Ned and I met.
Are we waiting for?
I think that's your cue to say something, Ned. I don't know. I haven't done many of these, not as many as you, but I think that's your cue to talk.
To talk, okay. It's usually not difficult, but it is. Here we are in 2023, and here I am at age 73. And how old are you?
I'm 46.
46. Okay, so we're different generations. But I really, in praising Pascui and all the others, I mean, this really is a crowning moment. I mean, it's been building for a long time, but when I was in school in the 50s in a little town on Cape Cod called Chatham, nobody talked about learning difference. There were two diagnoses, smart and stupid, and there was one treatment plan: try harder. And they would motivate you to try harder by humiliating you, sometimes hitting you, all manner of torture, basically. And in doing that, they created the real disability disorder, which is fear and shame and thinking you're a loser. And they had no notion that they were abusing these children who, given proper treatment, would be the future game changers. I mean, it's finally, the world is finally beginning to realize that it's far from taking these kids and having them become, normal, quote unquote. The goal is to unwrap their superpower and which they've got, and promote that. And when I started saying that, I learned about this condition in 1981, and when I realized right away that the medical model got only half of it. It left out all the good part. And when I started saying that, people took exception to it and said, why are you trying to make this sound like it's something good? And I said, because it is something good. My textbook was my patience, because the so-called authoritative textbooks got it all wrong, got half of it wrong. And being a sort of someone who likes to, speak his mind as opposed to say what he's told to say. And with John, it was just so exciting to be sort of on a crusade to free people from the prison that the misunderstanding of this condition had put them in. And then when I met you, I thought, my gosh, here's someone else, another fellow crusader who his mission is the same. By the way, we're very mission driven, we ADD types, and it was so exciting. And then getting Jill, who sadly has passed away, but she fell for it right away. And I think the world is finally coming to terms with the fact that these are our most gifted original people. The PCR test for COVID, you know what PCR stands for? It stands for polymerase chain reaction. The man who invented that had big time ADD, and he won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for the PCR. And the man who founded JetBlue Airlines. But the story about him, we've become friends, is arresting, because here he is telling me founded JetBlue, and how interesting it was. And he invented the electronic ticket, and he's the guy who came up with the idea of putting TVs in the seat in front of you. And one of the great names in aviation history, David Neeleman. But the day JetBlue went public on the stock market, in a matter of hours, he made hundreds of millions of dollars. Driving home, he said, was I driving home to celebrate? He said, no. I felt like the same loser who couldn't hack it in high school. And that's what we have to prevent. It is iatrogenic. It is maybe unintentional, but it happens, and it's still happening. As much as we've expanded the definition to include more and more people, it is still happening. These kids are still being just talked down to and made to feel, inadequate and disowning their gifts, their originality. Because, it is part of human nature. We don't like anything new. We don't like anything different. And when we see something different, we want to attack it or expel it or torture it. And so these kids like you and me, Jonathan, now we lucked out. I don't know, but I'm one of the very few people who I have dyslexia and ADHD. I'm one of the very few who can say I never had a bad teacher. And it's teachers really saved me, but I'm sure you had bad teachers, Jonathan. And we really need now to expand the definition, so that we welcome those of us who think outside the box, those of us who think differently, the innovators, the creators, the discoverers. Yes, we can be a pain in the butt sometimes, but my gosh, is it worth the price? And I'll stop talking, but I just, for me, it's very stirring, very exciting to see we're winning the battle. Because there were years when I thought, give it up. I mean, when I was on a talk show and the host said to me, don't you think a good belt of bourbon would be better than treatment for ADD? And, I said, I guess I got to go back to the drawing board, but now, I mean, by the time I die, I want people to wish they had this condition, because it really is, it is a buried treasure. Yes, it does take work to unearth it. And I know it is not an unmitigated blessing. Some people say I call it a gift. No, I call it a potential gift. But it can also ruin your life. The prisons are full of us, and the halls of the addicted, and the multiply divorced, and the marginalized, and the depressed, and the suicidal. So it can absolutely ruin your life. But what people don't realize is it can do the opposite. You can end up with a Nobel Prize.
Ned, I remember in the mid to late 90s, my co-author Dave Cole and I went to a CHAD conference. And for those on the conference tonight, CHAD is an acronym for Children and Adults with ADD, some version thereof. And you were doing a keynote paired with Russell Barkley. And nothing encapsulated more than the sort of got half right, half wrong that you just articulated than your debate with Russell Barkley. Those on the call not familiar with Russell Barkley, a vociferous advocate for the notion that ADD is an unequivocal deficit. Unequivocal deficit, and at the time took real issue with anyone trying to flip the coin a little bit and say, okay, well, there's another side, including yourself, Ned.
Oh, absolutely.
And
he said to me, will you stop saying good things about ADD? We'll never get any research money because nobody wants to fund an asset.
And I could stop saying good things about him, maybe, but certainly not about ADD, because I remember being in that audience. I was probably 23 years old, Ned, maybe 22, and took such courage from your courage to be out there debating this hard scientist on the gifts that come with this. And what I took from that, which I hope I've been able to honor that legacy in my own advocacy work, is to reframe who or what we call the problem. For most of human history, normal has been good and right. And that's broadly true. But it's very specifically true to brains. The notion of a normal brain was the right brain. And if you deviated from that middle of the bell curve, the problem was in you, and you were wrong. And that sort of problem in the person takes so many different manifestations and is deeply personal. But the truth is, and what I took from your debate with Russell, and what I've tried to carry forward in the world, the truth is the problem's not in the neurodivergence, it's in the interaction between neurodivergence and context. and environment. Let's take my life as an example of that. ADD, like real neurobiologically based challenges in my life. I have the attention span of a gnat. I struggle with executive functioning. I've explored the feasibility of stapling my car keys to my forehead, right? And if you've explored the feasibility of that, I'm going to save you some trouble. It doesn't work, right? Not a good idea. But then the other side of the coin is atypical attention span, as Ned has proven in his work, correlates with creativity, entrepreneurship. So the problem's not ADD, the problem's the school desk, right? The problem is the fact that on average, 75% of the day for kids is spent sitting still, passively receiving information. And ultimately, the problem is the shame and social stigma that kids get from not being able to sit still. And, Ned, I know we're generations apart, and I consider you a mentor and a luminary in the field.
Just one generation.
No, I was thinking three. Okay. You can tell math was not my strong suit. But I want to tell you something. I gave a talk yesterday. This is not 1997. This is not 2007. This is yesterday. And some dad came up to me and said his kid is being made to feel ashamed because they can't sit still all day and is gonna fail out of 8th grade. So we got a lot of work to do still. And a part of that work is in the education system, but a part of that work also is going back to that half right, half wrong in the medical sciences. Because this notion of neurodivergence, which is a new term relatively, is in contrast to neuropathology. And if you still look at the medical model based on norms and averages, if you still look at diagnosis, which by the way is a medical term, diagnosed with cancer, et cetera, we're still steeped in that one half of the story of biologically based brain problems. And we have not advanced enough the other half of the story of gifts, not despite, but because, and the problem being the way neurodivergent humans are treated and not intrinsic to them. So that's how I see your legacy. And I think of that debate as one of the seminal conversations embodied in you and Russell Barkley having at it, that we as a broader community, as a broader science community still must have, because norms and the notion of a normal brain is still deeply entrenched in our practices, policies, research studies, in our language, and in our textbooks.
But to give Russ credit, he has done impeccable research to prove how devastating it can be to have ADD.
Correct.
And he's right. To get research money, you had to do that, and to establish it as a bona fide diagnosis, you had to do that. So, as much as he can be kind of depressing to listen to, and he came up with the figure that ADD untreated knocks about 13 years off your life, which makes it as bad as diabetes or cigarette smoking. So, but we owe him a huge debt, and because in getting people to take this seriously, proving how bad it was. But I'm sort of, people say, he's like Darth Vader, and I'm like Pollyanna, so we're two sides of the same coin. And I've been stressing how wonderful it can be if you learn how to manage it. And Russ is saying, well, how awful it can be if you don't learn how to manage it. So I have to praise him, even though we are temperamentally very, very different. And I admire him a great deal. The idea of kids having to sit still in class, it's tell you a story about a man who a little bit younger than I am, a little bit older than you are, went to school in the Midwest, a Lutheran school. And he particularly liked to draw and to make people laugh. Well, that was not a good thing to do in this Lutheran school. And when you did things that were disapproved of, you got paddled. There was a big board and they whack you on your butt and it hurt a lot. This boy got paddled all the time, all through that school. They didn't stop when he was 10 years old. They kept doing it into high school. In 12th grade, getting paddled because he was drawing and making people laugh. Well, it's so inspirational to me. He graduated, and what happens? Well, he's the author of Captain Underpants. His name is Dave Pilkey, and his books have sold over 100 million copies. And he couldn't be dissuaded from pursuing his talent of unwrapping his gift, even though the school did its best to torture him out of it. And you know, I think what you and I are trying to create is a world where you don't have to get tortured to unwrap your gift. And you know, even the term ADHD, it's inaccurate. We don't have a deficit of attention. We have an abundance of attention. Our challenge is to control it. And disorder, I don't see it as a disorder. I see it as a trait. Can it be a disorder? Yes, but it can also be a phenomenal asset. You know, so I proposed a new term instead of ADHD, VAST, which stands for Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. And you know, and the word vast connotes, you know, vast, wonderful, spread your wings and fly. And that's the message we've got to get into schools and into, you know, there are doctors out there who diagnose ADHD as if they were diagnosing leukemia. I mean, these poor moms, it's usually moms, come in tears because they think their kid is not going to possibly have anything of a life. And it's just wrong. It's factually wrong. And that's why Semmel and you know, I was just part of another documentary called The Disruptors, and we put in many famous people, celebrities, along with following some people, diagnosis and treatment. And you know, you put together these examples and write about them, film about them. It's a towering reality that is being overlooked by people who, you know, it's the power of ignorance, but we are making progress. And, you know, the truth will out. It's just, it takes an awful long time.
You know, it also takes a paradigm shift, not just the paradigm shift of understanding because, not despite. And when I say that, it used to be, you know, okay, Jonathan, Ned, Pilkey, they have strengths despite their ADD, right? Like that was the model, which then implies that the ADD piece is something you can get rid of. And I do think we need to be honest and cognizant about, in an age of relentless enhancement technologies, whether it be CRISPR, which I'm sure y'all on the phone know, it sounds like a cool salad spinner. It is not, you know, it's a gene editing tool. And there's been public statements around the use of that tool to edit out of the genome traits that are associated with neurodivergence, like ADD and dyslexia and others. That's public statement. So when we say despite, we sort of think that we can get rid of these things, when the truth is it's because, right? It's because, you know, I know that Sally Shaywitz at Yale has done just phenomenal work about the connection between dyslexia and creativity. You know, the kid who can't read but they can draw. And again, it's not despite, it's because. Now, is that because a deeply neurological piece? Is it because of the compensating in personal and social skills? Is it all of the above? The answer is yes. But what we know is that these traits have survived. A whole constellation of neurodivergence has survived in the gene pool for a reason. Look, if there was no ADD, there would be no California. Okay, these are important variations of the species, to quote Darwin. So that paradigm shift is really important. But the other paradigm shift And again, I'm just bowing down because it was on that stage with Russell Barkley that night, is the challenging of a deficit model. So you have the challenging of the pathology medical model, which is a broad construct. And then you have the activation of the pathology model is to always talk about what's wrong with people and to constantly have their life organized around their deficits. You know, I know that personally. When I was a kid, it was always, you know, Jonathan can't sit still, Jonathan can't spell, Jonathan can't read, Jonathan can't. And that deficit model is institutionalized to this day. I mean, this dad yesterday talked to me about it in processes and procedures in schools. You know, the most common one is like an IEP. I'm sure folks on the phone know an IEP, individualized education plan, IEP. You know, got to be real about that thing. NSA, KGB got nothing on the IEP, right? I mean, it's like they're doing like.
Well, you know, there was a teacher in Oklahoma who literally handcuffed a fifth grader to his desk. So you can imagine handcuffing a kid. I mean, what was going through that teacher's mind? I mean, what in the world was going through that teacher's mind?
I think when you have a deficit lens, we do terrible things to people because we don't see their innate capacities and gifts. And so the flipping of that script is essential to advancing that vision that you've been advocating for, that I share, and has been central to the work that you do in the Hallowell Center. And I'm inspired by a future in which there's strength-based IEP planning. So there's a network of special education directors in America right now. This is not in a private school, public schools, that are identifying areas of growth for neurodivergence in deficit, but also in strength. So Jonathan's got a goal of being able to talk better, even though he's already good at it, right? So those are really concrete things that I think we all as a community can advance. And we can start flipping the script with our assessment. And then I know, and I've met so many clinicians inspired by you who do assessment differently. Look, they're going to look at the deficit areas, but they're also going to use assessment as an opportunity to surface strengths. Why not? It's all there in the same test. And so that notion of challenging the pathology model and then advancing an asset-based, strength-based model, you know, that's the future. That's the future that you've been fighting for, and your work has always represented.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to see you joining the parade and joining the army. You know, we're soldiering on. We need to invite more people. You know, it's a great group to be part of because we're just bursting with, you know, positive energy, new ideas. We're advancing the world. Believe me, whoever brought AI to us is a lot of ADD in that. You know, it's you know, we're marshaling and taking advantage of the force in this. I often say ADD is like Niagara Falls. It's just a lot of noise and mist until you build a hydroelectric plant, and then you light up the state of New York. So the key to success for us is finding our hydroelectric plant, and you know, because the gift doesn't unwrap itself. But once you find that hydroelectric plant, as you did, I think, Jonathan, just by writing about your mind and how it worked and showing people, you know, no, yeah, I have challenges, but you see, what people don't understand is that it's a mixture. It's neither all good or all bad. And we keep wanting to stick it into one or the other. No, it's a mixture. You have challenges, but you also have supreme talents that you know, getting a book published at the age of 20 is not common. It's very uncommon. And you know, that's a huge talent that you've got, and there's proof of it. And you also have challenges that get in your way, and that people have a hard time getting their head around that. It's okay to have both, and most of our symptoms have an opposite. You know, that even the three symptoms that we use to define ADD: distractibility, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. turn each of those on its head and you get a big time positive. The flip side of distractibility is curiosity. And we're driven by curiosity. That's why that's why we're so easily distracted. Because what's that? What's that? What's that? And curiosity is a huge asset. And then impulsivity. What is creativity but impulsivity gone right? You don't plan to have an earth-shattering idea. They pop. They come out of nowhere. And so if someone's impulsive, they're probably also very creative. And then the third one, hyperactivity, at my age, I'm 73, it's called energy. And I'm glad to have this little turbo pack on my back. So I think there's a tendency to want to categorize things as a disorder or not. And it's hard for people to get their head around. It can be both. Attention deficit. We can hyper focus better than anyone at times, and then our mind is wandering at other times. So I guess my point is the condition is so much more complex and variable than most people realize. And if you want to get the most out of it, you have to understand that.
Well, Ned, I'm this notion of let's get as many folks on this mission, right, as we can. I want to give a shout out to the teachers and professional therapists, supporters on the call and beyond, because it's really people day to day believing in the capacity of neurodivergent young people and adults to contribute that are changing this world and changing life outcomes. I know that's true in your journey, Ned. I know it's true in my journey. I can name and remember each one of those people who were in my corner, and whether they were using words like asset-based education or not, it kind of didn't matter. What they were doing was caring about a young person, seeing them for who they are, not who we think they should be, and building a deep relationship with them. Ned, you wrote a book after Driven to Distraction called Connect, and it couldn't be any more relevant now in our crisis of loneliness, our epidemic, according to the Surgeon General, of loneliness. And it couldn't be more relevant to this notion of how do we be that meaningful adult in the life of a young person. It's complicated, but it's not. It starts with connect. It starts with build that relationship. The other thing you said, Ned, that is in line with this notion of like let's build a big tent here, and this idea of it's and both. It's not either or. How can we hold an and both? With, let's be honest, it's hard for our society in general right now, right? Like we're not living in the age of nuance. We're living in the age of polarization. We're living in the age of you go to your corner, I go to my corner. And so this notion around ADD being all bad or all good is also caught up into that. So, and both. And I think for me, the way I and both it, and I offer this up to professionals, parents, whomever is here wrestling with that and both, is this emerging term of neurodiversity and neurodivergence. I think is really important. I think it's the most important breakthrough in social justice for brain differences after challenging the medical model and challenging the deficit model. This notion of neurodivergence, because neurodivergence doesn't say it's all rosy, it doesn't. It's not saying that it's a unequivocal gift. It can be, as you said, some people it's not, whether that's mental health, anxiety, depression, ADD, dyslexia. Neurodivergence is essentially just saying, look, here's the bell curve, right? Any trait is on the bell curve, and we're over here on the bell curve. And being over here is neither good nor bad. It's both. Look, that's true for me. I got to be clear, dyslexic, spell at a third grade level. I confuse words that look alike to this day. Who and how, horse and house. When I went to Brown, I thought they had a class in orgasmic chemistry. Okay. So imagine my disappointment on the first day of that class. So it's both. And neurodivergence is a way for us to hold the whole, acknowledge the challenge, acknowledge the deep embed in the genome of these differences, acknowledge the potential gifts, and then it's a way for us to build a big tent, because I see common cause, I see common solutions with ADD, dyslexia, autism, mental health challenges. Are there differences within that umbrella? Of course there are. I don't claim to represent somebody struggling with significant mental illness, but nonetheless, there's still areas of intersection and places for us to build a coalition and a movement that matters. Because when you put us all in the tent together, hey, we're talking about 25-30% of the population.
Or more. Earlier, or more, because the people who get diagnosed are the people who are failing, suffering. The ones who are thriving don't get counted. And I think it's rare to find an extremely creative person who doesn't have dyslexia, ADD, depression, bipolar, substance abuse, anxiety disorder. It is much more the rule than the exception. So there's something about these neurodiverse states that lines up with being creative, and the world depends upon creativity. What we have to do is stop this terrible stigmatizing and the shame it creates. And you're mentioning dyslexia and how it's a mixed bag. I have dyslexia, but I majored in English at Harvard, and I make my living writing books. But I am an incredibly slow reader. It takes me forever to get through a book. My wife says, I don't know how you know anything. It takes me so long to, but I do. And see, and that's what we got to stop and do, but that's what we want people. We want people to be surprised. The reality of these conditions is surprising because it's good and bad. It's adaptive and maladaptive. It's genius and idiot, and combined in the same person. I'm an idiot 25 times a day, and I don't mind saying that because I feel no shame. See, that's the thing. You got to get past the shame. I have to come back into the house because I forgot things, but I'm not ashamed of that. It's a pain in the butt. I'm annoyed by it, but I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah, get past shame. That's a disability that many of us have out there. If you would ask me when I was 18, 19 to describe myself, I would have said I'm the stupid, crazy, lazy kid.
Yeah.
And I hear those words, as I'm sure you do, Ned, in different permutations all around the country, from young people to this day. So that's a call to action. That's a call to action to elevate neurodivergence as an issue of social justice, to integrate it within our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what's so impressive is at age 20, you felt that, and you felt that call, and then you took it to the next step. You acted on it, and you wrote a book. I mean, that's very impressive. And I think that's where, and it's not unusual for people with ADD, reach for the sky and then get there. You got there. You didn't just dream about it. You made it happen.
Well, we made it happen. So thank you. I think with that said, I imagine that there was a Q&A idea, or Ned and I can just go on, for like an hour. So
let's do the Q&A.
I would love to listen to you go on, but we do have a lot of questions. But before I go to the questions, I really want to thank you both for this fascinating discussion. Jonathan, you are an inspiration to us all. You're a gifted speaker, gifted writer, just a warm human and such an inspiring advocate. So thank you for sharing all your gifts with our audience. Dr. Hallowell, I have heard about you for years and years and years. You've been on our list to have for an open mind, and I'm thrilled that you're here. You are a legend, an icon. And I just want to share what you said in rehearsal that we had for this program. You said, I don't treat disorders, I unwrap gifts. And that was really a profound statement. And I think a lot of people on this webinar will really that will resonate with them and get a lot of solace from that. So thank you. Okay, questions, and a topic that we haven't hit on, which we would be remiss if I didn't bring it up, and one of our listeners is asking about, well, saying that given that kids do have to attend school in the environment that exists right now, what are your thoughts on ADHD medication to help kids manage, learn, handle demands on their executive function?
Well, why don't I answer that since I prescribe it? And, you know, people will ask me, do you believe in medication? Do you believe in Ritalin? And my answer is, it's not a religious principle. You know, people treat it as if it were. It's not an act of faith. It's a matter of science. And if you take the emotion out of it and just say, you know, then the answer is obvious. If it helps and doesn't cause side effects, use it. If it doesn't help or does cause side effects, don't use it. I mean, what could be more straightforward than that? And yet people get up in arms and it becomes red state and blue state. It becomes God versus the devil. It becomes, you know, all this just hyperbolic, melodramatic fury. And it's a shame, because what happens is a lot of people who could really benefit from the meds don't get to use the meds because the parents won't let them. Or they themselves won't let them. And the truth is, medication as of today is by far the best immediate benefit comes from medication. And the day will come when we won't be using it. I'm sure that we'll be using herbs and all kinds of, I'm a big fan of non-medication treatments, and I've written books about that. But it would be just dishonest to deny the fact that when the meds work, nothing works that well. It's a lot like eyeglasses. Now, they don't always work. You get about 80% success rate. That means 20% not. But people oppose medication for the damnedest reasons. It's like they're sticking up for virtue by opposing medication. This medication, it makes parents of these kids feel guilty. You mean, am I doing something wrong? And the press, when they write about it, just write about the downside of it. I mean, the stimulant medication is a wonder drug. It has helped so many children and adults, spared them the suffering. And people ask me, what about the side effects? I say, okay, I'll tell you about the side effects. But what you got to think about also is, what are the side effects of untreated ADD? What are the side effects of year after year of being told you're less than and punished and discriminated? I mean, that is what leads to terrible, and if not permanent, at least long-lasting deficits of self-esteem, which is, believe me, once that's socked in, it's hard to get it out. Look at David Neilman, you know, driving home from a major victory saying, I felt like the same loser who couldn't hack it in high school. So to sum up, medication, see it as what it is, a medication, not a political statement. And the research, these meds have been extensively researched, probably more than any other drug we use, stimulant medication. And the facts are very clear. About 80% of the time, you can find a medication that gives you target symptom improvement with no side effects other than appetite suppression. And those people, in my opinion, ought to give it a try. And people also forget medication. A trial of medication is just that. It's a trial. You don't have to take it more than a day. So it's not like surgery that's irreversible. And people also worry, well, will I lose my special sauce? Will I lose my lyrical side? Will I lose my sense of humor? Not at all. In fact, you'll be able to organize and present all those ideas more effectively if the meds work.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hallowell. One of our listeners is asking specifically about stimulant medication. Can you comment on that? And then we'll move on to another subject.
Yeah, stimulant medication is the medication that the mainstay of medication treatment. And the first one was used in this country in 1937. Most people don't realize it's that long ago. It was amphetamine. And these kids, this Dr. Bradley had a bunch of kids on an inpatient ward that couldn't be controlled, and one day he decided, let's try amphetamine. And I'm not exactly sure why he thought of that, because you think, what, you're going to give speed to these already charged up kids? They were all boys. And Bradley said, yeah. And the kids, they took the amphetamine, and in 20 minutes, they were able to sit down and do things they had simply been unable, not unwilling, unable to do. And the kids loved it. They called it their arithmetic pill, because finally they could memorize these infernally boring math facts. And so it was a big breakthrough, because we proved that a medical intervention could succeed where thousands of years of shame and punishment and humiliation had miserably failed. And then Ritalin came in next, methylphenidate. By the way, the name Ritalin comes from the fact that the man who developed it, he developed it for his wife who had trouble focusing when playing tennis, and her name was Rita. So that's the name Ritalin comes from. And then other stimulants. But people say, well, how can a stimulant help someone who's already overstimulated? Well, this is how it works. It stimulates the brakes. It stimulates the inhibitory circuits. So it gives you more control. It allows you to focus when you don't have to, by the way, but it allows you, gives you the option of focusing by stimulating the inhibitory circuits in the brain.
Thank you.
And the stimulants remain the mainstay. There are non-stimulant medications that people we use as well, but it's the two main molecules are amphetamine and methylphenidate.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions here about what can educators and also what can parents do to support neurodiverse students? Jonathan, you want to take that one first? Because your mom really supported you. And talk about a couple of the teachers that were pivotal in your life.
Yeah, I think my mom's a good North Star, both in the parenting space and also just in the advocacy sports side. My mom, don't mess with Colleen Mooney. She's like a 4'11" Irish woman on a good day and high heels on her tippy toes. She has a high pitched squeaky voice like Minnie Mouse, and she curses like a truck driver, right? And if you were a principal or a teacher doing wrong by me, you did not want cursing Minnie Mouse in your face, right? but that's where my mom was. And my mom is. She's still alive. And my mom would say to anyone who would listen, she would say, if my son doesn't learn the way he's taught, then teach the way he learns.
So good.
And I'll admit that's a little bit of a paraphrase, because when my mom said it, there were a whole bunch of F-bombs in there that I left out for polite company. But that really embodies not only being an advocate for somebody, whether you're a teacher or an educator, but a paradigm shift away from trying to make the square peg fit the round hole. When we put the problem in the person, when normal is good and right, deviations from the norm are wrong, it often leads us down an exclusive path of trying to fix the person and make them fit back into that bell curve. And there's a role, unquestionably, for remediation, support, and therapy. Those were big parts of my journey. I'll be clear about that. But there's an equal role, just like we're talking about the and both. The and both is change the environment around the kid as well, through being an advocate for accommodations. I was accommodated at Brown for my reading challenges with speech to text, with my writing challenges from dictation, for my inability to sit still. It was a change the environment mentality, a reorientation of our area of intervention. And that made all the difference. To go back to this conversation around medication, Ned is right. If the tool works, use it. And what we know about other tools in our toolbox of neurodiverse empowerment is that changing the environment to include active learning, project-based learning, to include access to information through technology, that those have tremendous impacts on self-esteem, self-efficacy, and ultimately on life outcomes. So my advice out there is channel your inner cursing Minnie or Mickey Mouse, and fight for the environment to change, for an environment that's grounded in universal design principles, and that's grounded in the idea that we all have a right to learn differently.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was beautiful. We have a comment here from actually a Friends of Semel board member. She had to fight for her 4 children with ADD and dyslexia. She was the only one that believed in them. She fought for them. Their father called them lazy kids. Today, they are highly successful adults, 2 lawyers, an endocrinologist, and a business person. She's actually spoken at one of our gala events about this. And, you know, but she was the advocate. Somebody has to be in your court, as your mom was, as I know many parents are. And then we have a funny comment, if I can only find it now, from Jenny, who I can't find her exact comment, but this was for you, Jonathan, that she said she doesn't staple her keys to her forehead, but she does use like a fanny pack, and always keeps them with her, even when she's in the house. I can't find the exact comment. We have so many. We can have one more question, and that was a few people asked about diet. If there's anything that you would suggest or you know, that is better than something else when it comes to diet for ADD or ADHD.
Why don't we both respond to that? Give them your 2 cents worth.
Well, you know, my diet it consists almost entirely of black coffee. And it's called a red eye because it's black coffee with some ground up Ritalin. So I may not be the best person to answer this, but I can tell you, I believe deeply, in all seriousness, in one of the challenges and opportunities of being neurodiverse is diet, sleep, exercise. You know, Ned, our good friend, your co-author, John Rady wrote a book called Spark, which is a Bible of mine sitting up on my bookshelf right over here. And it's an and both. If the tool works, use it. And we know empirically that diet, exercise, sleep, mindfulness, those are effective tools to create the conditions in which one's gifts can fuel their life and contribute to the world.
I just would add to that list what I call the other vitamin C, vitamin connect.
Yeah. Yes.
The daily doses
Yes.
of connection are you know, really wonderful. And you know, as for the best diet, anybody's guess. I mean, if you want to really get bathed in information, Google nutrition and ADD, and you'll be swimming for forever. Yeah, I think most people agree sugar. Watch out for sugar. Most people agree that you know, obviously, watch out for substance abuse. Way more common in our group. Watch out for that. Whole foods as opposed to processed foods. I think everyone would agree on that. Additives, junk food, stay away from those. And as for supplements, you know, I think I take a fish oil supplement and a vitamin D and a vitamin B complex, but there was a time, because there are many of these out there, many reputable people recommending this powder and that elixir, and I was taking all of them. And because I used myself as an experimental animal. And if nothing else, I had the most expensive urine in Boston. Because these things cost a lot of money. I think, you know, there's no doubt that nutrition, what you eat, affects your brain. But you know, the book is not, I'll tell you though, Gerbarg and Brown, I think is the best if you want the book on herbs and It's called non-medication treatments for ADHD. It's a classic. It's been out around, I think it's been around for about 15 years. But they get into, you know, rhodiola, and all these things that are probably good. And I just what's exciting about being alive today is there's so much that's known. But what's intimidating and disheartening about being alive today is I can't begin to learn a tiny fraction of it. So I'm saying to my patients all the time, I don't know. And beware of a doctor who can't say those words. I don't know, because there's so much known. Nobody can know it all, you know. And I'm sure you agree with that, Jonathan. We are in a time where humility is really important.
And humility in the discipline of science is specifically important. The norm has been put to nefarious usage in the eugenic movement and beyond, where humility was in short supply, where everybody seemed to know which human was the right human and which human was the wrong human. And I think we need a dose of humility about the variations of the species and how we're all the right human.
One of my favorite lines is, help me always to search for the truth, but spare me the company of those who have found it.
Great line. Thank you. Thank you both. I couldn't sum this up any better than one of our viewers that says, thank you, Jonathan and Ned, for educating my son who's on the spectrum and ADD. He's an absolute hoot and a hellcat of a 5-year-old boy who I love very much. And your words are inspiring and provide a different perspective for me to help to position my son to be successful. What could be better than that?
That's great.
So thank you, everyone. Pascui, I know you're there. Thank you for your beautiful film. It was just heartwarming and just absolutely beautifully done. So thank you for that. Ned, Jonathan, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for the privilege of your time. And stay safe and stay well. These are very challenging, stressful times, and just be well. And we hope to see you next time. Our next Open Mind is on Tuesday, November 7th. And it's going to be on stroke prevention, a new topic for the Friends of Seminole and Resnick Board. So thank you all. Have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.